Chapter 1 of Roosevelt's Communist Manifesto by Emanuel M. Josephson. Adam Weishaupt, Communism's Father. Adam Weishaupt, scion of a traditionally Catholic Bavarian family that ranked high in the church educational circle, was trained by the Jesuits. Thanks to the influence of his family in Jesuit circles, Weishaupt was made professor of canon, or church law, at the Ingolstadt High School at the age of 24 years. In the course of his training, Weishaupt had conceived a paranoid hatred of the Jesuits and of the faith of his forebears. This led him to the insanely grandiose scheme of destroying the Catholic Church and of taking over the Holy Roman Empire and the world in a one-world absolute dictatorship dominated by himself. On May 1st, day 1776, at the age of 28, Adam Weishaupt founded a secret society for the purpose of carrying out his revolutionary conspiracy, that he named the Order of the Perfectibilists. Weishaupt pretended that his objective was a new social order and social security for the people that was to be obtained by perfecting human nature. The name of the organization he changed shortly after its founding to the Order of the Illuminati, with the implication that its members were enlightened, free, or liberal. The term liberal has since then been reversed for those who accept Weishaupt's ideas. Weishaupt was a master propagandist and realized that liberal, as applied to his conspiracy, would become accepted because a lie repeated often enough comes to be believed. The extent to which this was accomplished is indicated by the fact that the day on which he founded the order, May Day, is celebrated throughout the world by liberals, radicals, revolutionaries, and labor organization in recognition of the fact that it was the mother of all revolutionary organizations dedicated to class warfare in the modern era. The task that Weishaupt had set for himself was twofold. First was destroying the prevailing order. Second was building up a worldwide dictatorship under his dominion. The first task required the reduction of the peoples of the world to serfdom by introducing them to renounce their allegiances and wealth, or by robbing them of their possessions and usurping power over them. To bring about reunification of wealth, as in the rest of the conspiracy, Weishaupt unhesitantly adopted the devices tried and proved by the very religions that he denounced and sought to destroy as rivals of the mastery of human minds. He proclaimed that man is fallen from a condition of liberty, equality, and the state of pure nature. Man is not bad except as he is made so by arbitrary morality. He is bad because religion, the state, and bad examples pervert him. He therefore required abandonment of all the trapping of civilization, the destruction of religion, of family life, and parental discipline, and of all existent governments, and he denounced ethics and morality as a violation of reason and natural law. The stress on natural law as the basis of true science and human organization clearly stamps the luminous followers of Weishaupt, including Clinton Roosevelt. Weishaupt alleged that existent organized religions are not true religions, that as Clinton Roosevelt repeats, the function of true religion is to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and make on earth peace and goodwill to man. This function of providing social security, Weishaupt alleged was not served by any religion and could be served only by his new religion, Illuminism. However, Workshop organized his order along the lines of Jesuit organization and drew heavily on abandoned sections of the canon, especially on the canon of usury, for his teachings. He was a ruthless politician. He was a master at the art of pretending to be all things to all men and using men's stupidity to destroy them. He cautionally avoided shocking the religion among the initiates into the order by pretending to support religion. He taught them that Christ was the first author of Illuminism, through which he sought to lead mankind back to the original liberty and equality that had been lost after the fall of Adam and Eve. And he exhorted his disciples to scorn riches in order to prepare the world for a community of goods that would do away with private property. But to members advanced into the secrets of the order, who were pledged to absolute discipline and to yield to our molding hands, he taught. The pretended religion of Christ was nothing else than the works of priests, of fraud and tyranny. Other religions have the same myths of their origin, are equally founded on lying, error, riddle, and fraud. In order to destroy Christianity and all religion, we pretend to have the only true religion. For the end justifies the means, and those we have taken to deliver you and the human race from all religions are nothing but pious frauds. But Weishaupt was a shrewd student of religion and of canon law. He saw in the abandoned sections of the canon law on usury a diabolical device for robbing nations and enslaving them. This section had been abandoned because it had been found by the church not only impractical but actually dangerous, except possibly in church orders where asceticism and devotion are the mainsprings and motives of existence. The rank and file of mankind engages in a struggle of existence and necessarily must be endowed with a strong sense of possession as an aid in the acquisition of material things essential for the survival in the world at large. Canon law decreed that there must be production for use and not for profit, and that making profit in a business transaction is the sin and crime of usury. Usury was a cardinal sin and a capital offense under the canon. As a result of this canon on usury, the industry, commerce, and civilization of the Roman Empire disintegrated, and civilization and culture vanished. Only three vocations were left open to mankind. 1. Joining the orders of the church. 2. Earning by the sweat of the brow as a laborer. 3. The more cunning, ruthless, and violent individuals in the role of knights possessed as protectors of labor, or labor leaders, while actually enslaving the workers, and the more ruthless and violent the knights, the more serfs he enthralled, the more people he robbed, the wealthier and more powerful he became, all in the guise of protecting his victims and giving them security. The more powerful and ruthless Vandals, in no wise hampered by inhibitions imposed by the teachings of the Church, in turn vanquished the knights who were handicapped thereby, and both elements preyed on the church itself. A man could hold his possessions or his womenfolk, and a church, monastery, or convent could hold their property and wealth only so long as they were strong enough to fight for them, or able to muster others to their defense. It meant rule by labor and violence, and an end to law and order. This became the age of darkness that is known as medievalism. It reflects credit on the church that it recognize in the communism of canon law on usury the roots of the evils of medievalism, and that it abandoned that section. This prepared the way for the Renaissance, the law and order, and for the beginning of the rise of human liberty. Professor Weishaupt knew the destructive force and the malevolent, enslaving power inherent in the communist nature of the canon on usury, and he saw in it a weapon with which to impoverish and enslave mankind and gain dominion over the world. He embraced this dross of the church that he planned to destroy and made it the basis of his conspiracy. This he represented as a new social order. He also pretended that he could root out possessiveness from human nature and thereby perfect it. This is the fundamental fallacy of communism, even when it is sincerely tried, as has been revealed by numerous experiments during the 19th century, for the purpose of stealthily robbing peoples of their wealth when they refuse to voluntarily renounce it. Weishaupt conceived of devices for confiscating all wealth by taxation. He advocated a progressive income tax and an even more confiscatory inheritance tax that would bar transmission of wealth and concentrates in the hands of himself as ruler. He urged the abolition of private property in any form, government ownership of industry, banking, and commerce, the complete regimentation and enslavement of labor in a discipline that required absolute submission of wealth, body, and soul. And since, as the educator, he realized the value of education in gaining control of the minds of peoples, which means also control of their wealth and fortunes, and its value in gaining dominance by brainwashing, he required government control of education. A clearer concept of his conspiracy can be had if it is borne in mind that Weishaupt's government in reality meant himself as dictator. Professor Weishaupt, versed in church lore, he knew well the effectiveness of espionage, torture, terrorism, and of savagery as devices for enforcing the subjugation and discipline of mankind. He established within his order for that purpose a Gestapo-type terrorist and murderous espionage agency, which he called insinuating brothers, to ensure that there would be no leak in the secrets of the conspirators under threats of torture and vindicative persecution, and to aid in the subjugation of the citizenry. This unit got its first extensive workout in the French Reign of Terror. Every totalitarian movement that has carried on the conspiracy since then adopted this device of Weishaupt's. The terrorist espionage corps is symbolized in the insignia of the Order of Illuminati by the all-spine eye mounted on a pyramid that represents the secrets of the order. It is this insignia, strangely enough, that appears on the Great Seal of the United States of America, placed there by Weishaupt's agents in the American colonies. The Weishaupt dictated a luminous code enshrines lying, deceit, treachery, treason, brutality, violence, torture, and murder as sources of strength. vis-a-vis the stupid dilettante folks who accept civilization, culture, ethics, morality, and religion as their code. He taught that savagery would serve to intimidate, subjugate, and terrorize their adversaries, and thereby serve to speed the attainment of the conspirators' goal, which is the subjugation and enslavement of the more decent elements of mankind, and the concentration of power in their own hands. Weishaupt taught that human life is worthless and meaningless except as a device to further his conspiracy. His followers have been instructed to lie without scruples, to deceive and betray without hesitancy. They always have been enjoined to deny their inheritance to the conspiracy, to deny its illuminous, socialistic, communist character when exposed, and to regularly attack and vilify their accusers and pose as injured parties whose civil rights were violated. Weishaupt and his associates set the example for the conspirators by hiding their criminal activities behind alias, a custom that still prevails among them. The destruction of existent governments Weishaupt planned to obtain through any device that would serve to weaken and destroy them. Internally, within the nations, the recommended devices are spending the nation into bankruptcy and inflation, class warfare, especially between labor and capital, revolution, and civil war. The destruction wrought between the nations by economic and physical warfare, however, was recommended by Weishaupt as most effective in leveling down all nations to a common denominator of misery that would make them already prey for a dictator and facilitate the attainment of the goal of the conspirators, one world united in serfdom under one dictator. Naturally, the attainment of this ultimate goal required the elimination of patriotism and the fostering of so-called internationalism. Patriotism was condemned by Weishaupt and his followers ever since as a vice. He wrote, "Nationalism, or national love, took the place of universal love. Thus, the origin of states, or governments, of civil society, was the seed of discord, and patriotism found punishment in itself. Do away with love of country, and men will come once more to know and love each other." From the start, the luminous socialist communist conspiracy has been truly international. From time to time, its leadership has been shifted from one country to another. Agents of the conspiracy make it their careers. Weishaupt required that they worm their ways into government posts of confidence in policy-making capacities. Once a government post has been attained, the conspirators are required to promote a steady infiltration of the government by their fellow conspirators. As partners in crime, they are required to rise as a unit to the defense of their fellow conspirators, to protect them against all charges exposing their international associations to attack, defame, and smear all persons and organizations that undertake to expose the conspiracy, and to persecute and destroy them, and to further their conspiracy in every manner and by every crime that will serve its purpose. They are required to be traitors to the government that employs them, and to betray those governments into the hands of the current leaders of the conspiracy, in whatever land they currently may happen to be. Conspirator agents are shifted from one land to another in key capacity in order to ensure against the possible reversion to national loyalty. A prime function of internationalism from the viewpoint of the conspirators is to instigate and agitate a constant chain of tension, antagonize, and warfare between nations, betraying each in turn until they are so weakened that they will fall ready prey to conspirators who bore from within. From the point of view of the conspirators, patriotism assumes the aspects of isolationism that frustrates their scheme. Treason against the rest of the world is, according to Worshop's perfectibilism, an essential and laudable trait, a virtue of which only his so-called liberals can be capable. Treason is the essential feature of what the conspirators called internationalism, and their anthem, L'Internationale, expresses the real nature of the conspiracy. Other essential features of the conspiracy that were dictated by Worshop that still characterize it today are the following: a philanthropic pose and pretension to furthering the good of mankind and working their goodwill on humans. Bipartisanship. Worshop demanded that the conspirators have no loyalty except to the conspiracy, that they never hesitate to pretend adherence to any and every cause in the interest of infiltrating them and taking them over for the furtherance of the conspiracy. 3. Lifetime dedication to the conspiracy. This gives it continuity during centuries. The assignment of the conspirators is perpetual and is in many instances hereditary, handed down from parent to offspring. During unfavorable periods for the conspiracy, its agents go underground, continuing their activities in posts given them by fellow conspirators, that by preference are in the field of education, where they can continue to subversive propaganda amongst the rising generation. When the political climate becomes more favorable for the conspirators, they emerge into the open in government posts, once again carrying on. This is strikingly illustrated in the activities of Worshop's followers in the United States in recent decades. Thus, adherents of Woodrow Wilson vanished from the public scene into cluttered halls and emerged in 1933 after years of hibernation as the excellent agents of the new fair and Ike deals. A consequence of the perseverance of the conspirators is the fact that, with few exceptions, the most of the members of Congress in all parties are their agents. The seats and cunning of the conspirators, who are enjoyed by revealing their identification with the conspiracy and impressed with the necessity of denying their adherents venomous vindictiveness, are visited by them on all who betray or expose them. The extent of the goodwill towards fellow men of the Illuminists is epitomized in Worshop's advice to them. Apply yourself to the art of counterfeiting, of masking yourself and spying on others, of picking their minds. For the purpose of carrying out his conspiracy, Worshop organized his Order of Illuminati as a rigidly regimented hierarchy in which each member was pledged to secrecy, under threat of reprisal, persecution, torture, and death, at the hands of the Gestapo, symbolized by the insignia of the order, and to absolute, unquestioning obedience and abject submission and loyalty to superiors. The members of the Order of Illuminati, like the members of their successors, the Communist Party, were intended to constitute the ruling class of a world dictatorship that would enslave all mankind. They were marshaled into several classes or degrees that in rising rank were classified roughly as follows. First, novices, lesser Illuminati, initiates, second Freemason, ordinary, Scottish, and Scottish Knights, and third, the mystery classes, including 2 grades of priests, regents, pontifex, grand potentates, magus, and king. Only the mystery classes were admitted to the knowledge of the criminal purposes of the Order of Illuminati. The organization of the order of that Weishaupt conceived and created for the purpose of carrying out his brutal, destructive conspiracy that was intended to rob, despoil, and enslave mankind, and to restore medievalism that was intended to seduce mankind to overthrow its old misrulers for new ones who are even more ruthless and cruel than the old, was closely patterned on the old order which he presented to wish to destroy. It owed much to the discipline of the Society of Jesuits, in which Weishaupt had been trained and which he hated, and to the order of Teutonic Knights, the centuries-old group that had been granted by the Vatican the right to bring the faith to the Slavic heathen at the point of the sword. The subsequently interpreted this grant as a mission to rule the world. Their motto and objective was Deutschland über alles, a world dictatorship of German rulers. Weishaupt dictated as the basic principle of his order the maxim, the end justifies the means. All concepts of civilization, of honesty, honor, decency, morality, ethics, and humanity he scorned and cast aside as the despised roots of the weakness that would betray mankind, their civilized adversaries, into the hands of the conspirators. Lying, deceit, shiftiness, dishonesty, brutality, ruthlessness, and murder he enshrined as virtues in the true etymological sense of the word, source of power. Weishaupt dictated that these virtues were to be inculcated into the young, rising generations through all devices of education, entertainment, and propaganda. He directed that wholesome parental discipline over them should be destroyed as to make the children ready prey of his ghoulish crew. From time immemorial, crafty men have conceived and struggled for mastery of the minds of their more naive fellow men. For control of man's mind means control of his body, his wealth, his fortune, and his destiny. Such struggle for ostensibly benign purpose is manifest in the history of religion. For malignant purposes, it has always constituted an essential feature of every conspiracy against humanity, and is used for the creation of intolerance and hatreds that serve the purposes of the conspirators. The progress of gaining control of minds en masse goes by various names: education, propaganda, and in its most brutal form, brainwashing. Professor Weishaupt, as an educator, was fully aware of how much greater is the potency of control of man's mind than control of his body. He dictated a pattern of conversion of education and all media of mass communication to subversive propaganda. This has become quite familiar to moderns through the activities of the agencies of our so-called philanthropic foundational trust that includes the Carnegie and Rockefeller foundations, and of all the schools, colleges, and universities, newspapers, periodicals, radio, television, movies, libraries, clubs, societies, and other agencies of mass communication dominated by them. Professor Weishaupt also was the receiver of the more forceful forms of brainwashing made familiar to the world by the Calvary, the Inquisition, the Gestapo, the OGPU, the NKVD, the Black Hand, in the form of his terroristic espionage organization, insinuating brothers, symbolized by the pyramid-mounted eye. Weishaupt wrote, "It is also necessary to gain the common people to our order. The great means to that end is influence in the schools." He required of his followers that they yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. It is interesting to note that the entire occasional letter number 1 issued in 1904 by John D. Rockefeller and Rev. Frederick Gates, his almoner, as a statement of the purposes of their philanthropy, the General Education Board, is virtually paraphrased from the writings of Adam Weishaupt. Both held to the premise: man is the most contemptible of all animals, because it is the only animal that can be influenced to destroy itself. Weishaupt dared to go one step further than his followers. He openly expressed his contempt and openly revealed in the despicable stupidity of his brainwashed followers. Thus, he wrote, "The most admirable thing of all is that the great Protestants and Reformed theologians who belong to our order see it in it the true and genuine mind of the Christian religion. Oh, man, what can you not be led to believe?" He demanded blind and abject adherence to the order's party line, as dictated by himself, through all its devilishness, lies, contradictions, falseness, and deceit, complete acceptance of mental warping and brainwashing, and questioning physical submission. Unquestioning physical submission. Any follower who questioned or resisted his dictates, or who failed in abject submission, was purged. He had no scruples about saying what he sought to lure dupes into his order, and he wrote, "These people swell our numbers and fill our treasury. Get busy and make these folks nibble at our baits, but do not tell them our secrets. They are not to be admitted to the secret degré, and knowledge of the conspiracy to enslave them, the true purpose of the order. They must be made to believe that the low degree that they have reached is the highest." It would be difficult to express more concisely the objectives of Weishaupt's conspiracy in the field of educational propaganda than was done in the above-mentioned occasional letter number 1 of Rockefeller's General Educational Board. It reads as follows: "In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present educational conventions fade our minds, and, unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers, or men of learning or of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We shall not reach for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple, as well as a very beautiful one, to train these peoples as we find them to a perfectly ideal life, just where they are. So we will organize our children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way, in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm. All the vital elements of Weishaupt's conspiracy are found in this letter. First, there is the pose of philanthropy. Second, the intent to brainwash or mold. Third, the abandonment of tradition, science, and learning. Fourth, the dictatorship objective. Fifth, the intent to regiment the peasantry into the caste system, just where they are. Sixth, the intent to reduce national intelligence to the lowest common denominator and to destroy parental influence, which has been so successful that it has given the country a terrifying wave of juvenile delinquency. Seventh, contempt of the peasantry, who were also called our children by the tyrannical Tsar, the little white father. Seventh, the element of deceit that entered the situation when the too frank avowal of the true purposes of the foundation became recognized shortly after it was founded, and the Rockefellers belied their intent to reduce intelligence to the lowest denominator and posed as patrons of art, letters, and science. Eighth, the element of subversion and un-Americanism, the avowed intent to overthrow accepted customs and institutions to serve the purposes of the Rockefeller sponsors and to further their plots and schemes. And finally, perfectibilism, the perfecting of human nature, worships shame. Rockefellers and the philanthropic foundational trusts that they have contrived are beyond any doubt the most effective advocates, executors, and missionaries of Warshaw's Illuminist, socialistic, communistic dictatorship program. The brainwashing of the United States of America began in 1904 through all channels of education and mass communication, over which they have usurped complete control, has been so completely effective that the American public has no suspicion or intimation of the fact that they can only think as Rockefeller wishes them to think, that they have been trained or perfected to serve Rockefeller's purpose. Like his Rockefeller followers and their public relation henchman, Professor Warshaupt was a master propagandist. He took special pains to lure into the order of Illuminati the top names of the era among the philosophers, authors, newsmen, and all who had at their disposal the media of mass communication, and the order in turn undertook to enhance the effectiveness of the propaganda and of its members by boosting and promoting them in a spirit of mutual admiration. The ranks of the order of Illuminati were filled with literati who realized the material advantages of its supports. In its ranks were to be found the encyclopedists, Voltaire and Rousseau, who played so large a role in the preliminary propaganda that prepared the way for the French Revolution that was engineered by the order. In Germany, its ranks were joined by Goethe, Engels, and Karl Marx. Marx's Communist Manifesto that publicized and administrative aspects of the Illuminist, socialist, communist conspiracy was directly plagiarized from Warshop's teachings and writings. In America, DeWitt Clinton, Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, and Clinton Roosevelt were amongst the Illuminatists' adherents. Warshop overlooked no source of support and revenue for his philanthropic or order, thus setting an example that his successors have invariably followed. He undertook to be all things to all men and women, and promised everyone fulfillment of his or her needs and desires, no matter on how contradictory. Warshop organized a ladies' auxiliary of the Order of Illuminati that was limited to virtuous or relatively virtuous women, who he promised protection of hearth and home. He also organized a women's auxiliary for tramps, bums, and prostitutes, to whom he promised a monopoly of the favors of the husbands of the members of the ladies' auxiliary. This method has been followed faithfully by Warshop's successors in the conspiracy. Several groups of members offered Warshop special problems. The Protestant princes and rulers of Germany and Europe were delighted with the Warshop's plan to destroy the Catholic Church, and they flocked to the order. They brought with them control of the Masonic order, in which they initiated Warshop and his fellow conspirators in 1777. Subsequently, at the Congress of Wilsbad, they effected a merge of the Order of Illuminati and the Masonic Order. Warshop sought and welcomed the powerful support of these rulers, but he realized that he must not permit them to suspect that, in furtherance of his internationalist goal of one world dictatorship, the order was dedicated to destroying them also. Warshop craftily solved this problem by limiting the princes and rulers to the lower degrees and barring them from the knowledge of the true purpose of the order, that were revealed cautiously only to those in higher degrees. Renegade Jesuits, whom Warshop initially welcomed, then rejected, and finally welcomed once again into the order, and Jews who were initially rejected and later were welcomed also constituted special problems. Eventually, however, Warshop and his successors welcomed into the order these groups, and all others that could be trusted to be thoroughly discontent with the prevailing order, and it was primarily renegade Catholics, chronic malcontents, and revolutionaries among the Protestants and Jews who were selectively advanced to the highest degrees and innermost secrets of the Order of Illuminati and its successor organizations. In time, crafty cunning was made of the Jews by the Illuminatist conspirators. Special Illuminatist lodges were set up amongst them, such as the Egyptian Rite of Memphis, established by Cagliostro, the Rite of Mizraim, established in Paris, and the Haskalah, Hebrew for enlightenment or illuminism, in the Slavic countries. The Illuminists gained the support of the Jews by pretending to foster the movement of their liberation and release from the ghetto. More than a century elapsed before it might have become obvious to the Jewish supporters of the Illuminist, socialist, communist conspiracy that their supposed liberators merely planned to impose on them and on fellow minorities dupes far more brutal, murderous forms of serfdom and inhumanity that bears the name of National Socialism and Communism. But unfortunately, most of them fail to recognize how they have betrayed themselves and have been duped into the role of catspaw, who further their own destruction and by becoming pawns of the master conspirators. They continue to play a prominent but minor role in the conspiracy. As a result of it, they have leaped quite literally from the frying pan into the fire. from the ghetto to the concentration camp and its gas chambers and incinerators. In the conspirators' plan for effecting a dictatorship device of wiping out individuality through regimentation into organizations dominated by themselves, in which the faceless rank and file are denied any voice, has been relied upon heavily. The key organizations in this regimentation have been labor unions. From the very beginning, the control of labor has been one of the first goals dictated by Adam Weishaupt. For control of labor implies control of the bulk of the populace and control of virtually all production and services. In addition, through labor unions set up and controlled by them, the conspirators have ushered themselves control of the earnings and wealth of the workers and enabled them to levy a special tax for the privilege of working, for their own private enrichment, and for the further financing of the conspiracy. It has also given the conspirators a weapon with which to blackmail on an unlimited scale under the pretense of welfare, health funds, and pensions, and an endless array of devices, both industry and the community. Like the knights of medieval times, the conspirator labor leaders represent that they are protecting labor while exploiting, despoiling, looting, and blackmailing the workers. The conspirators carefully hide from their victims that the regimentation in unions is the initial stage of the conspiracy and establishes the framework of the organization that spells their actual enslavements. When the ultimate goal of dictatorship is obtained, not even the most rabidly radical of the conspirators among the labor leaders dares deny that the workers of Soviet Russia are reduced to slavery through unionization, exactly as planned by Adam Weishaupt and his followers Roosevelt and Marx. Weishaupt was a master criminal of the type that appears at rare intervals in world history, who alone can aspire to attaining mastery over the world by their utter ruthlessness and rule it as one world, their own world. He operated as a prince of confidence men. He undertook to convince all elements of society that they would reap vast benefits, all that they desired, from his conspiracy, which was cynically designed to betray them all. Workers who were to be enslaved, employers who were to be looted and ruined, rulers who were to be overthrown and executed, clergymen whose religions were to be wiped out. By the cell type of organization of the conspiracy, Weishaupt undertook to prevent the segregated groups from learning that all of them were to be betrayed instead of being led to salvation. The conspiracy was well designed to play upon the weaknesses, selfishness, greed, cupidity, and stupidity of the bulk of mankind. Robinson, in his Proofs of a Conspiracy, sums up Weishaupt's Illuminist program as follows. In the lodges, death was declared eternal sleep. Patriotism and loyalty were called narrow-minded prejudices, incompatible with benevolence. They meant to abolish laws which protected property accumulated by long continued and successful industry, and to prevent future accumulation. They intended to root out all religion and ordinary morality, to break the bonds of domestic life by destroying veneration for marriage vows and by taking the education of children out of the hands of parents. These plans could only derive from a successful imposition on mankind of the organizational aspects of the conspiracy. This organization, modified to adapt it to American conditions, are embodied in Clinton Roosevelt's Science of Government. Direct derivatives of such organization are the administrative phases of Weishaupt's conspiracy. They are in effect the following essential measures. 1. Overthrow of existent governments and their replacement by a dictatorship of the conspirators. 2. Looting individuals and nations of their wealth through such devices as violence and war, capital and income taxes, confiscatory inheritance taxes, and eventually an end of private ownership of property except at the hands of the conspirators, who would then own all property and usurp the power that such ownership should yield. 3. Destruction of all religions, supplanting them with doctrines laid down by the conspirators. 4. Destruction of the family and supplanting its discipline by that of the dictators. 5. Internationalism, that was required by the conspirators' scheme for control over one world, involving the outlawing of patriotism and the fostering of treason. These aspects of the conspiracy were first widely broadcast with the aid of Clinton Roosevelt and his Illuminist associates by Heinrich Karl Marx, who, as usual, plagiarized them without even intimating the Weishaupt Illuminist source. If you have enjoyed this reading and want to hear more like it, please consider subscribing to not miss next week's second chapter, The Rise of the Illuministic, Socialistic, Communist Conspiracy in America.